Hello lovely people, welcome back. I'm continuing in this video with the lovely interview with Shoestring Jane. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go and watch the other video. Yes, so carrying on with Jane's questions, which are great. And the next few questions, they take a slightly darker turn. In so much as I hope in all my videos, the one thing I hope I convey most is sort of optimism, joyful life, loving life, etc., etc. But I hope I also portray the reality. Excuse me. This is nothing to worry about, it's just a tickle. I hope I portray the reality that it isn't easy. I don't talk about it much because I don't want the trolls to jump on me and be all neggy about, oh, if it isn't easy, go and get a proper job. Because I'm doing a proper job. I'm looking after myself. Anyway, so yeah, I hope that that's what I convey most of the time. But I think a couple of the next questions are really good because possibly people, I think, may possibly watch my videos and think, oh, that looks like a lovely life, I'm going to do that too, without realising, you know, quite what it takes. So the first question is, have you had any expensive disasters during your 5 years living without a wage? I wouldn't say disasters, but I did have a big bill and it was sort of unexpected. So in the other video I was saying that literally any money that comes in above my originally 300 for bills, 100 for living, now 400 for bills, 100 for living, any money over and above that I always put away. I have a saving fund for a new computer if I need one, a new sewing machine if I need one, a new camera if I need one. Build those. I also have another separate savings account which is for building what I would hope would be the equivalent of 6 months of pay, which is for me 500 a month. I'm not there yet. So that if ever I was sick again, if I was out of action completely for a couple of weeks, there would be a reserve to use. And thank goodness, I've always been a saver, but thank goodness, because when did I actually pay the bill? It's over a year ago now. You all know by now that I'm planning to move next year, and I'm moving because there are 60, outside that front door, there are 60 stairs to get down to street level. I just can't do it anymore. Now, I own the flat, but the land the flat sits on, like is the case in so many cities and towns everywhere, is rented. So I have a lease for the ground that the bricks sit on. That lease, when I bought the property, was 100 years, which is standard, but one of my neighbours downstairs pointed out that our lease was down to 80 years. I'd forgotten how long I'd lived here. It was down to 81 years, and when it goes below 80 years, most mortgage lenders will not lend. In other words, I want to sell my property, young person coming along like I was 20 years ago, their first home, they won't get a mortgage for it. So it's like, oh my goodness. So we basically have had to pay to extend the lease. It's such a simple thing to do, but of course that involves solicitors, my solicitor and the leaseholder's solicitor. We have to pay the leaseholder's solicitor. Now we did get a really good deal because us three flats, we all did it together and used one solicitor, which brought the cost down. But it was a socking great bill in the thousands. I was able to pay for most of it myself with my savings, took a small loan from a friend, which is also now paid back. But yeah, I would say it wasn't quite a disaster. And, you know, I've since, my sister got cross with me when she found out how close it had been and I'd taken a loan from someone else. She's like, if you're ever in that situation again, ask me, I'll lend you some money. And you know what, and I would not be so stupid as to say, well, I haven't got any money for the lease, I won't extend it. That would have been stupid. Of course, I would have gone to my sister, gone to the bank. I would have gone everywhere and anywhere to get that money together to pay for it. Anyway, that's done. And in other, I suppose in other disaster scenarios, you might think about things like the washing machine breaking, the computer breaking, the camera, the computer and the sewing machine. If any of those were to break and I couldn't replace them, that would be disastrous because that's how I make my income. But that's why I sort of self-insure, if you like. I'm going to talk about that another day. So that shouldn't be a disaster. Things like, oh, the roof. Well, the entire roof was replaced about 6 years ago, was it? So I was still working, but we all of the flats, and I include this in my 400 a month, even though we pay it once a year, we all contribute to a maintenance fund. So that if things go wrong, we had a drain pipe issue at the back at the beginning of the year. That came out of the fund. So we all contribute, and that builds up quite a fund. So that the actual building, the material of the building, we have a fund for if there's, you know, a problem. If the problem is big, like the roof, and we all have to pay more than is in the fund, it's divided and it's not quite equal. I pay a bit less than everyone else because this is a studio, the other flats are one bed flats. So, you know, even with the roof I was able to do it because we had the fund, the rest of the cost is divided, and I was working at the time. So the short answer, have I had any expensive disasters? Not, well, yeah, the lease. I don't call it a disaster though because I should have foreseen it. I should have thought about it. I'm not going to get caught out on that one again. So this is what I mean about it's all going a bit bleak, Jane. She says, are you worried about the current cost of living crisis? And I've got to say, this question has been coming up a lot in comments recently. So the simple answer is, of course I'm worried about it. Of course I am. Everybody is worried about it. Everybody's thinking about it. Everybody's talking about it. I can't, there's nothing I can do about what's coming in terms of fuel bills and rising food prices and all that. I can't do anything about that. All I can do is continue to do what I do, but maybe do a bit more of it in terms of work. Are there ways I can, you know, look, the bottom line is I'm going to be in the same position as literally everybody else in this country. And I think probably other parts of Europe. I think I was reading in the press the other day that, you know, Germany is heading in a similar direction. I'm not sure. You know, I think globally we're all being affected by the war, for one thing, both in terms of fuel and in terms of food exports. So my attitude is, yes, I'm worried about it in exactly the same way that everybody else is. Am I more worried about it? Is my life a bit more tenuous than it is for other people? I actually think possibly not. I think I'm so used to hustling. I'm so used to doing without. I'm so used to just knuckling down and getting on and getting through tough times that I think I might bear this storm, weather this storm, not more easily is the wrong word, but with a little less stress than some of my friends who are used to being able to spend a lot and go out a lot and do a lot and and I think, you know, I think about my nurse colleagues suddenly they won't be able to have their 3 holidays a year and new clothes every week and I think they will find it tougher than me. There will be some changes for me, like everybody else. Of course, I'll be thinking about, do I really need to put the heating on? Can I put a 17th jumper on? I'll be like Michelin woman with all my jumpers on. Maybe I need an extra blanket over my knees in the evening. So, you know, in a nutshell, you know, actually, I think I will manage. I'll manage because I have to. Simple as that. I think actually, though, I'm more worried for other people. That's the bottom line. You know, I can adjust, I can change, I can flex on things, I can do a bit more of this, a bit less of that. But I know there are going to be people out there who, you know, I think about pensioners on a fixed pension, much, much older. I'm not talking about, you know, 68, 69-year-olds, 88, 89-year-olds who, they're not going to be able to suddenly start some kind of side hustle. They're not going to start eBay selling or what have you. So yeah, I'm more worried about other people than I am about myself. I will be okay because I have to be, and somehow or other I always make sure that I am. I feel a bit emotional actually. Let's take a pause. Okay, back to bright and cheerful. How much of your food do you grow yourself, and what would you say your weekly food bill is? I've never really properly worked it out, but I would say what I eat, I would say at least, it's got to be a good 70% has come from the garden. So my weekly food bill, well, it changes every week. You know, some weeks I spend nothing. Yeah, this week I'm not spending anything. I always used to give myself a £10 allowance for shopping, and that's for food and other stuff like cleaning stuff, loo rolls, cleaning and loo rolls. I have nudged that up recently to 12 quid a week. Woo! Just because prices are going up. Sometimes, you know, if I haven't spent anything, sometimes I will carry that forward to the next week and think, although I was going to say I carry it forward to the next week and then I'll do a bulk buy of, say, rice or oil or something. But generally what I do is, if I'm not spending, if it's a week where I don't need to spend, I might say to myself, okay, well, I'm going to go and get a kilo of rice or, you know, a kilo of lentils. I don't need to buy that this week, but I will because this week I'm not spending. So it fluctuates, but I would say about, it's going to go up, isn't it? At the moment, it's about £12 a week I allow myself for all shopping, and not just food. Actual food, I don't know, 5 to 7 quid a week. That's going to change obviously when I move and don't have a garden. It'll be really interesting to see how that pans out next year. Let's make it interesting, not worrying. No more worrying. Great question. Is there any job that would tempt you back to a traditional workplace? So when I read this, I thought, firing off. And then I realised 2 of the jobs are fantasy jobs. You know, if I really, really, really had to go back to a traditional job, I would almost certainly try to find work in the book trade again, selling antiquarian, out of print, rare books. So, you know, working in a bookshop, not a chain store bookshop selling modern books, but, you know, like the old bookshop I worked in South Kensington. Think 84 Charing Cross Road. I loved that work. I love matching books with people. I love customers. I love chatting, getting to know them, finding the perfect rare volume of something for them. Loved that. So if I was tempted back into any job, it would be a bookshop, hands down. Yeah, I was going to say in terms of acting, but I don't think I would want to go back to acting now, just because I wouldn't be able to stand being on my feet all day in rehearsals. I mean, I loved it, but I wouldn't be able to physically do it anymore. But my 2 fantasy jobs, let me tell you very quickly. One is to sit next to Claire Balding, being the anchor for All Sport. Yeah, can't think of anything more brilliant for me. 1, sitting next to Claire Balding. I love her so much. 2, presenting. Love that. Kind of presenting, performing, fan. Sport. I mean, wouldn't that be the genius job for me? Dear BBC, please give Vivi a job. Sports anchor. Move over Hazel Irvine. Move over Gabby Rosin. Move over Jeanette Quatchy. She's suddenly on the scene. You can keep Claire, but move all the others over. Sue retired this year, didn't she? Sue Barker's retired from Wimbledon. Told you, fantasy job. And my other fantasy job, you know, would never have happened, because when I, you know, went to university, drama school, and I wanted to act, that was it. But in a different life, I think I would have been really keen to, because I'm really interested in science and medicine and sport, combine them all, to do some sort of sports science, sports medicine. That would have been fascinating as well. But yeah, they're not actual jobs that would tempt me back into work, because I'm not qualified, but a bookshop would. Great question. She says, what advice would you give to people contemplating a change of direction similar to yours? Well, I think my biggest piece of advice right now is I wouldn't do anything hasty, just because, you know, financially and politically everything is so volatile at the moment. If you've got a job, you know, even if you don't particularly like it, but you can, you know, just stick with what you've got. But let's say better times. I think the biggest piece of advice would be to say, I think if you were going to jump ship, make sure it's going to be something that you absolutely love doing. Because there are days when you're not going to get paid to do it. The hours are crazy long. It depends what you're going to go and do. It might be that you can do something in much shorter hours. Well done. But this particular kind of life, this sort of trying to be self-sufficient and just keep ticking things over, be prepared for your hours to double, if not treble. Be prepared for the fact that there's no sick pay, there's no holiday pay. You know, whatever you decide you want to do, you need to have a backup plan, and you need to have a backup plan for the backup plan, and a backup plan for that backup plan. But primarily, overwhelmingly, I think it has to be something that you already love. Because if you don't love it, I think you would soon come to resent it. You'd resent the hours, you would resent the low pay. You know, like any crafter knows that the hours that go into making a piece, the pay you get, you know, I was thinking about a hand-knitted sweater. The hours that go into that, your pay rate is probably like 50 pence an hour. This life is not going to be about making money at all. This life is going to be about how can you make enough money to pay the boring bills, but how can you have a life that you love and enjoy? So yeah, overwhelmingly, if you want to, what was the question? What advice would you give to people contemplating a change of direction? Only do it if you really, really love it and you're prepared to be poor as a church mouse but happy, and prepared for the long, long hours. It's great. I highly recommend it. And she says, do you think you will continue living from your garden forever? or do you have a retirement plan? Okay, so you can see how long it is that I've been meaning to reply to all this, because do you continue living from your garden forever? Well, we now know that in the meantime, I've decided to give the garden up. I'm very happy and relieved with that decision. But I do hope to continue growing. So wherever I move to, I really, really hope to get some amount of garden space to grow in. And even if it's the tiniest space, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to pack it to the gills with as much veg as I can. As far as a retirement plan, not really. So I have always paid into my state pension via national insurance. I continue, that's one of the things I've continued to do even now. I am paying my national insurance still as voluntary contributions, so I'll get my state pension. I will get a minuscule pension from the NHS, because for years I didn't pay in because I was paying off £30,000 of debt it cost me to train to become a nurse. So there will be a little bit of retirement fund. But in all honesty, to be honest with you, I love what I'm doing. I love my life, so long as I'm physically able. Obviously the garden, not so much. But in terms of sewing and side hustling, I enjoy it. So I don't see any reason to stop. I don't think, retirement age in the UK at the moment is 67. It's more than a decade away for me. Who knows what will happen in the next decade anyway. But I don't see, I'm trying to phrase this. Even if I was working, let's say I was working in a bookshop, back in those days of being in the bookshop, I don't see 67 as being some big cut-off and going, right, I stop work now, stop work and sit back and do nothing. And I know loads of you who are retired who certainly have not sat back and done nothing. Now you're doing your crafting and your veg growing and all those things. So, no, I don't have a retirement plan, but I think that's partly because I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing, because I love it. So I won't be continuing to live from my garden forever, but I will hopefully have sort of this lifestyle forever. Yay! Really good one. What are your 3 best... oh, it's the last question as well. What are your 3 best frugal living tips? I'm going to come back to my little catchphrase. The best frugal living tip I can give anyone is to always ask yourself, when you're about to hand over money for anything, is, do I really need it? And so often you'll be able to answer with, no, I don't really need it. Don't buy it. There you go, frugal straight away. And there are some things, I really do need it. Is it something you can do yourself? Make yourself, mend yourself? You go. But I think, do I really need it as a question? Literally every single time you're about to hand over money, even if it's 50p, that question, and if you don't really need it, put your money back in your purse. Better still, don't have it in your purse in the first place, have it in your little savings account. I did make some notes for this because I didn't want to forget. I think so much of being frugal is just about retraining your brain from, we've all been bombarded our whole lives by adverts, encouragement to buy stuff, the ease with which we can buy, a couple of taps on a keyboard and you've spent 20 quid. So I think it's about retraining your brain, coming back to that, do I really need it? Just retrain your brain that, we've all come to, when I was growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, nobody I knew went on foreign holidays. No one. I remember I was about 15 or so before one of my friends, their family went to Spain for a week, and we thought, oh my God, they're so posh. Going to Spain for a week, it was a big deal. We live in a generation now where we think it's almost our right to have at least 1-2 week holiday in the sun somewhere. So I think that's that brain retraining that I'm talking about, is that all these things we expect to have been kind of shoved at us over the years by people wanting our money. So a bit of brain retraining. And I think finally, Esther, for people of an age, my biggest bit of advice, and it's not just about the frugal living, and it's also to do with that if you're thinking of a change of direction, all of those things, is don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to go against the tide, as it were. That thing of, you know, the foreign holidays, and I get asked questions, or I get often asked questions like, oh, but you have no social life, you never go out, you don't have this, it must be a miserable. It's like, that's your conditioning in your brain. You're conditioned to think that the only way to be happy is to go out to a restaurant and spend a load of money, and it's not. So yeah, don't be afraid to be different. Even if everybody around you is telling you that you should buy a whole new wardrobe every single year, buck the trend and say, no, I don't need to buy a new wardrobe every year. I'll wear whatever I want and I won't care what people think. So yeah, do I really need it? If the answer is no, put it back. And just hold your head high and be happy in what you're doing, and don't worry about what other people think. Because you know what, I reckon over the next few months or so, more and more people will be coming around to our way of thinking anyway. And then we won't look so weird and wacky and odd, will we? All right, lovelies, thank you so much for hanging out with me, especially if you've hung out for both the videos. I think there were some great questions from Jane. Jane, thank you so much. I think one of the reasons I think some of the questions were great is because they are perhaps things which I sort of take for granted. I forget that actually this is stuff that people might want to know because it is a bit different or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, fab questions. So let's all say a big thank you to Jane. Thank you, Jane. And if you haven't done already, it's under here. Hop on over and give her channel a look. Go and have a wave to Jane and say, hi Jane from Vivi. The clouds are getting darker and darker. Oh, we're going to have rain. Please let me off the watering today. I will see you all again really soon, I hope. It really needs to be in the garden. I need to do some gardening. The brassicas. But look, until then, please look after yourselves. Stay well. I'm going to say try not to worry too much. And when people tell me that, I think, oh, shut up, I can't help it if I worry. But really, I think at the moment, there is a lot of worry around, a lot of worry. And you know what? We're all in the same boat. I think, you know, if we talk with each other, if we share, especially if we share hints and tips and ideas, great. We will get through this. We will be okay. Everything will be okay. It's going to be tight and it might be a bit different and it might be difficult for a while, but we'll do it. We have got this. We'll do it together. All right, lovelies. Cheerio.